Now, when you think about batons, oftentimes you think about law enforcement, and batons, truncheons, whatever you want to call them, are the oldest, less lethal tool that has been utilized by law enforcement pretty much anywhere in the world. There's records of these being used literally centuries, even thousands of years ago, by law enforcement officials, people that are trying to keep the peace, as a way of delivering some impact. Oftentimes we call it pain compliance. Okay? And so I want to talk a little bit again about that. So when you talk about batons, okay, batons in general, including expandable batons, we're talking about the ability to generate blunt trauma. Okay? And I've heard people before say, batons are not effective based on maybe the experience they had in law enforcement or with experience in other areas. But to say that a baton, an impact weapon, is not effective is to say that any type of blunt trauma is not effective in general. To say that punching is not effective, kicking is not effective. All a baton is a tool that's utilized to generate blunt trauma. Okay? So if you think about if you got hit by a baseball bat, if you got hit by a tire iron, if you got hit by a crowbar, a lead pipe, okay? These are all things that you think, yeah, if I got hit by that, depending on a few variables, it can hurt, it can be effective. Okay? And the same thing is true with a baton, right? There's a number of variables there. Some of those variables are the tool itself, the qualities of that tool, okay? Meaning the length, the circumference, the density of that tool. And then there's the wielder of the tool, the end user, and the variables that come with that portion there. Okay. I've got here a common police baton. This is actually a baton I utilized when I was a full-time police officer and worked public order during the Winter Olympics here in Utah. This is a very common type of what's often called a straight stick. Okay? And you can see it's got a good circumference to it. The weight is not too heavy, not maybe a little bit light for me, but again, when talking about police tools, oftentimes you're trying to find one tool that fits all, meaning tall officers, short officers, strong officers, weak officers, male officers, female officers, so on and so forth. So it's just kind of a general one-size-fits-all type of a tool. And it's pretty good for serving, its intended purposes. Okay? The density of this tool and the length of it are going to be some factors that make this effective or not. Okay? The density meaning the ability to generate some kinetic energy. Okay? As I hit someone and I'm trying to generate some pain or potentially some injury, the more kinetic energy I can generate with this tool, the more effective it's going to be. And there's a couple of key components of kinetic energy. One of them is going to be velocity or acceleration, and the other is going to be mass. Okay? And the tool here is the side that is going to determine what kind of mass is there. Right? And so the more mass that's in this, the more that side of that equation is going to be enhanced. The less mass I have in this, then that's going to diminish. And which is going to kind of come in when I talk about expandable batons. Okay? And then we talk about acceleration, then you're talking about the ability of the end user to get some good speed and power in their striking. Okay? Now, the pros of a baton like this is a straight stick is the ability to kind of have a little bit more mass potentially. When you talk about expandable batons, oftentimes you're talking about a baton that has to be able to close into itself. Okay? Therefore, each portion of that that's going inside the other has to get smaller and smaller. And there you see, this is kind of a first generation, I guess you could call it, of expandable batons that were really utilized to a wide degree by law enforcement. This is an ASP brand friction lock expandable baton. Okay? If you've used these, you're kind of familiar with it, but you can see what I'm talking about. Each shaft, as it goes, it expands, gets smaller, and then smaller, so that the shaft that I end up having to utilize typically to hit with is very thin in this particular tool. Okay, and so oftentimes it's so thin they got to add another little knob on the end there so that it is not going to actually penetrate if I had to thrust at someone, which is not really effective with a friction lock baton anyway because of the capacity for it to close in on my hand as I do that. Okay, but that's kind of one of the first generation there. And again, it was, there were some pros and cons to it. It was, again, a first generation of baton, so it was more readily available. I could keep it on my belt when I need it, okay, and I have it there, just like with a firearm. If I'm going to get in, if I know I'm going into a gunfight, I prefer to have a shotgun or a rifle with me. But a handgun is something I can have with me at all times, and it's available in that emergency when I need it, and I don't have time to get other tools. Same thing with this. It's just the expandable baton. It's something small, compact. I can have it on my belt at all times. And in fact, when I was a new police officer in the two departments I worked with, Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and Salt Lake City PD, the baton was something that we had, but everyone still had one of these. And at least with the Sheriff's Office, we still had a ring on our belt, so if we knew we were going to a quote-unquote hot call, something that was high probability of turning into a fight, then we would grab that out of our car, ring it up, and I'd have it with me. Okay, so we had the options, understanding that, yeah, that was probably going to be the better tool. Okay, but that again was on my belt at all times when I needed it, and I didn't have time to go back to my car to grab that. Okay. One of the problems we saw with these is, and again, as my experience as a police trainer is, one, we saw a lot of bendage. Okay, we just saw a lot of them that would bend when they were for a friction lock baton or an expandable baton. If it bends, it's not going to close in on itself anymore. So that was one of the issues we saw. Probably the bigger issue was just the fact that that side has such little mass that officers, and I've experienced this myself, carrying these on the street, would hit people, and it just wouldn't be effective. Not because batons are not effective. Sometimes it was the tool had a lot to do with it. Sometimes it was the end user, okay? But the tool, with no mass there, if you kind of think about, if I just had a hanger, a clothes hanger, right? A wire clothes hanger, and I just opened up and I hit someone with it, right? It's metal, right? It's just very thin. You can think about how effective that's going to maybe hurt. It's got that kind of a whipping kind of effect, but it's really not going to stop anyone that's intent on doing their criminal actions or their violent actions. So that was one of the problems, the confidence in the tool that, or the lack of confidence that these types of batons brought. And I know officers that whenever they took these out, they didn't even try hitting it with like it was intended. They would turn it upside down and like a baseball bat, and decided that they were more effective hitting with the handle. Okay, which is probably out of policy in most places, but I know officers that would do that. Okay, another generation you started seeing come out in batons, and again, I'm not getting into all manufacturers here, but just a general generation kind of technology. You started seeing locking batons like this Monadnock Auto Lock. Okay, it's better in that it is physically locked open. Friction lock batons, sometimes when you hit, breaks the friction and they close on you in the middle of a fight. And so you don't want a baton that you're trying to open in the middle of that altercation. Sometimes you'll also see that they just open so tight that they're really hard to close. You got to bang them on some cement to get them to close. This one is a locking baton. Tolerances are not great. You can kind of hear the rattle in that, how much give it's got, and it's still fairly thin too in that end shaft, so it loses a lot of that mass. They would do things like add another piece on the end. I forget what they call it, the power tip or something like that, to add a little bit more mass onto it. But a little bit better in technology, but going in the right direction. Again, there's other batons. ASP came out with a locking baton about 15 years ago or more. 15 to 20 years ago, a German company, Bonowi, who I had done a lot of consulting and training work for over the last 15 years, came out with their baton that doesn't have that rattle, a lot tighter tolerances. Because it is tighter tolerances, you can see that they're actually a lot tighter fit, so that end shaft does have more mass, right? So you're kind of helping to remedy the issue of less mass in the strike surface, a little bit better weight in that. And a great locking mechanism that fixed some of the problems in earlier designs from different manufacturers. Again, with these, you hit that button on the end and they close up. Okay, and again, these batons all come in different lengths. There's other companies out there doing great things too. A company from Ireland it's the first time I've seen something like this, but this is a 4 sections expandable baton. You see how big that is. Obviously this would be too big to utilize with one hand, but it'll be utilized with 2 hands, okay, like a baseball bat or a shinai and a kendo type strikes. But it's a 2-handed, a lot more standoff. But again, training is paramount, because the longer the weapon is, the easier it is for the person you're using it on to get a hold of it, right? So you've got kind of pro and con. But again, the length of that is another benefit of a baton, expandable batons included, right? Is I've got more standoff distance. I can hit someone and stay out of the range that, but hopefully, all things being equal, that they could hit me without closing the gap, so on and so forth. So I've got potentially the ability to generate more impact with that tool, generate more kinetic energy and they're easy to learn, right? It's a very natural movement to get a baton and just do that motion, just to hit like that, okay? It's a very natural movement, so training the masses, training police officers to do that, versus trying to teach them to be expert boxers, so on and so forth. And then the other side of that too, there's no injury to the baton, right? So I'm not hurting parts of my body by striking. I've got longer standoff distances. I've got the potential to create more kinetic energy. So lots of advantages to these tools. And there's a reason why, again, it's not only the oldest, less lethal tool utilized by law enforcement around the world, but it's today the most common, without a doubt, less lethal tool utilized around the world. Obviously, there's other things that officers use, chemical agents, pepper spray, OC, you've got tasers, things of that nature that are available in some parts of the world, but they're completely not available or not legal in other parts of the world. And sometimes it's just because of the cost or because of the laws. So that, again, it comes back to the baton as the most common tool, still widely used here in the United States. And as I travel the world personally, I see it used in a lot of countries. Why? Because it's effective, okay? It just takes a good tool and also good training, okay? Training is a paramount thing here, because in order for that tool to be effective, I need to be able to deliver strikes with good power, speed, okay? Speed is a component of power kinetic energy, timing, and distance awareness. In other words, accuracy, being able to hit what I'm trying to hit without getting hit by the person that I'm trying to hit, right? So I'm trying to accomplish all these things, and that takes training, okay? The tool can also be used as a leverage implement in what we call baton-assisted control holds, something that in the TRICOM training videos that we get into, trying to make it as simple as possible, because it can get complex and training time is often limited for law enforcement. But if you're the kind of person that's going to train on your own, then there's a lot of great things you can learn as far as utilizing a baton to leverage control holds, okay? So it's a great tool. It requires training. Okay? There's a lot of great training that we for this tool that we have in the TRICOM Expandable Baton program. So check them out. And for the next few days, this is the longer video of this week, but for the next few days, I'll be putting out a few more videos talking about some of the pros and cons of an expandable baton. Look forward to it. Talk to you then. The more complex these techniques become, the less likely you're going to be able to use them in a real situation under stress. Push out, and that could be to the face. Shuffling in, and then come down. That just gives me a target. Push, and then strike. I'm going to bring it around behind his back, okay? Because now if he bends his arm, I'm going to lose that. I may transition in case I need it. See how I drop my shoulder, grabbing the baton. If I'm choking him, what's my end game? Is this a lethal force situation? Well, in most situations, it is if I'm trying to put a choke in on with the baton. So I'm just trying to survive some kind of encounter that's just gotten out of hand. Not crossing my arms as I bring this weapon out, but bringing this weapon around. The knife. If I just try and transition here, what's going to happen is action versus reaction. Bang, he's going to stick me with that knife before I've got a chance to get my sidearm out. Hit propels the shoulder forward, and that propels the weapon. Push down. I don't want to bring his hand to my gun. And I twist to bring him over to the side. Twist. 1, 2, 3, boom, and then I come in with a quick combo. I just want to start answering back as quickly as possible and do the technique slow. That way you're not going to get any injuries in your training. Have fun with it. And I'm doing plank position and then getting the baton out, striking, and from here I'm trying to create space. Okay, getting my baton out. It may be a simple thing, but it's not necessarily a natural thing. Same principles of power. And just do it slow to start off with. Get your distance and timing. I'm here in a real world environment. There may be things on the ground. So just be cognizant that those should only be done at the opportune time. Most people will need some training in, and I always will end in the exact same fighting posture. I'm going to use my training partner here to kind of help illustrate that change in distance. I move in here, and I could actually reach the head with the pommel of the baton. I've changed that much distance. Very high profile, and immediately I end back in my fighting posture that we've talked about. Be very low profile in that I'm still trying to de-escalate a potentially volatile situation, so that when I take the baton out, it opens out of the holster. And let the energy transfer into the target before I retract it or go to the other side of the body. Up to the left shoulder, cross load, but I don't want to lean away and shy away from those punches because that puts me off balance and it's going to knock me potentially even to the ground. If I'm going to attempt a lock with the baton, I need to create a window of opportunity. If I attempt to put a lock on someone and they're assaulting me, I'm probably going to get hit.
1 minute, stand by.